Margaret Councole. Well, indeed, Taoiseach, it's impossible to understand the horrors that took place in the Irish Free State and the Irish Republic, indeed, and that have just only recently come to light with the mother and babies scandals, without understanding the unique relationship that developed between the Irish State and the Catholic Church in particular, and in essence where a very weak capitalist state dominated by gombeans, small businesses, etc., and right-wing politicians, desperately in search of security and legitimacy, leaned on the authority of the Catholic Church for that legitimacy and ceded quite considerable powers that should have been democratically controlled by a democratic state, ceded it to a church institution. And would the Taoiseach agree then that the theological writ of one church dictated, in fact, horrific control mechanisms informed by a misogynistic and patriarchal outlook that women and girls were particularly the victims of, in particular the obsession with women's sexuality that fostered shame and fear and secrecy. And this was preached from pulpit to the All Éireann and reflected in the media. So, Taoiseach, do you agree that the state that we have today is still marked considerably by that history, and that in particular the Irish state outsourcing critical social services like health and education to a religious institution meant that those services were never developed in the comprehensive, all-embracing way that they should be by a democratic state, if it was truly democratic and representative of the people. And that is evident to this day. And can I ask you, in your discussions currently and in recent times with church leaders, have you spoken about the need for the complete separation of church and state in this state? And have you spoken about the implications of that for control of education, for example, and the need to develop and implement democratic structures of running education that involve parents, that involve students, where students of the age, that involve the community in general, that involve teachers and instructors, but that do not rely on an authoritarian patronage that is decided simply by a church or two or three churches that are influential parts of this society. And what measures are you taking to ensure that this complete democratic separation of church and state is brought about in all the services that are crucial to our people, but particularly in education?
Well, I've tried to articulate that on a number of occasions myself in the past. It is true to say that the society and the country and the people here were dominated by one church for many decades. Clearly that brought with it its difficulties and its legacies. I'm glad that there's been a very significant shift in recognising that these legacy issues of the past need to be apologised for, need to be opened up, need to be dealt with, and those who are involved be brought before the hand of justice. I agree with you in respect of young girls and women. I know where I come from that where births occurred out of wedlock, many had to go to England or to Liverpool because of a perception of scandal and shame being brought upon their families. I was a pupil myself in Castlebar, in the De La Salle order. And I have to say that during my years in the day secondary school, I actually don't know of anybody who was, sexually abused in that school. And while the regime was as hard as any other in terms of corporal punishment, the same applied across the board. But the brothers who were there, the De La Salle brothers, with a small number of lay teachers, I think did the very best they could in trying to uphold the standards of teaching. And I say that from personal experience. Others may have had different experiences depending on where they were. I have spoken about this to Archbishop Martin here in Dublin on a number of occasions. He has made the point himself that the extent of ownership of schools by the church is too great, and for that reason that they would like to have part of that patronage extended to others, retaining the right to have their own ethos in Catholic schools, the same as for any other religion in theirs. So this is, I think, an issue that is all the time, part of the progress of our society. But I have to say, Deputy, that I think the relationship between church and state is clearer and stronger and more healthy now because of the actions taken by government in, setting up a Department of Children, a Minister for Children, a referendum on children, changing the laws here, and the response from the Catholic Church and from other churches to having that clarity of what it is that they stand for and the responsibilities of the state towards society and our people on the other hand. So maybe your view of history is slightly revisionist in some ways. Others would have maybe different views. But I agree with you in terms of domination of the people and society, which was unhealthy for many people with its consequent legacies. And I hope that these things are being addressed. The latest commission of investigation to be set up by government in the mother and baby homes is another part of dealing with a sad element of that particular legacy.